In Python, we have primitive and non-primitive data type. Primitive like strings, numbers, and booleans. We did a video about them, so I will link them in the description. Non-primitive like list, tuple, set, and dictionary. So in this video, we will start with lists. Hi everyone, this is Texent, and let's start with this Python tutorial. Now, a list in Python is referenced with brackets, and inside those brackets, we insert different data type, like strings, boolean, numbers, and so on. So right now, I'm gonna declare a variable called lst, which stands for list, and I'm gonna put inside a name John, which is a string, then another name, Kiran, let's say, then a boolean value, which is true, and some numbers. Now if I print my list, I should get the list that I wrote over here, and yep, we got it. Now as we did in strings, we used bracket notation to access different characters in a string. We can do the same thing with list to access different elements inside it. So let me print lst index 0. What do you think we will get? Definitely we'll get the first element, which is John. What if I wrote 2? What do you think we will get? Well, we'll get the value true. That's because true is at the index number 2. 0, 1, and 2. Let's say I wrote negative values like -1. Definitely I will get the last element, which is 34, and we got it. That's because when we use negative values, Python will start from the end. Let's say I wrote -2, I should get 12. And we got 12. Let's say right now I want to access a range of elements, like John and Kiran. To do that, I need to mention the start and the ending index. To do that, I'm just gonna write here 0 and index 2. And we will get John and Kiran. That's because we start at index 0 all the way to index number 1. That's because the last index or the ending index is excluded. Let's say I didn't mention the ending index, I will get the same list as above, because it will start from index 0 all the way to the end. Let's say I didn't mention the start and mentioned the ending, like 4, we will get is John, Kiran, True, and 12. That's because we start from the beginning all the way to index 4. Right now, let's say I want to change true into false. To do that, I'm gonna use bracket notation. So lst index, and true is at index number 2. So I'm gonna write 2, and I'm gonna set this into false. Let me print lst, and we should get, instead of true, false. I could do the same to the others. Let's say I set lst index 0, and instead of John, I'm gonna write David. And let us print the list, and we will get David at the beginning instead of John. Now that we know how to write a list, let's go to the next section and learn about 2D lists. In this section, you will learn about 2D lists, also called matrix. So what's a matrix or a 2D list? It's a list inside of a list. That means we have the big list, and inside of this big list, we have inner lists. Let me show you an example. So what you're seeing in front of you is a 2D list. We have the big list, and inside this big list, we have inner lists. So we have in total 3 rows and 3 columns. As we did earlier, we use bracket notation to access individual elements from a list. Let's use the same concept to access number 2 in this 2D list. So let me write print lst, and first we need to mention the index of the inner list that contains number 2. So the inner list that contains number 2 is the first inner list, which is at index number 0. So I'm gonna write 0, and right now we need to mention the index of number 2. So 0, 1. Number 2 is at index number 1. So what do you think we'll get right now? Let's test that, and we will get 2. Let's say I wrote 1 over here and 2 over here. What do you think I will get? Definitely 6. Excellent. Also, we use bracket notation to change elements. So to do that, I'm gonna change LST index 0, index 1 to the number 4. Print LST, and what we should get is, instead of 2, we will get 4 over here. Excellent. Now that we know what's a 2D list or a matrix is, let's jump into the next section and learn about list functions. In this section, you will learn about list functions. Those functions are already built in Python, and we, as programmers, we could use them in our code. First, let's talk about the append function. This append function actually adds an element at the end of the list. Let me say lst.append, and I'm gonna append the number 9. Print lst, and we should get the number 9 at the end of the list. But let's say I want the number 9 to be at the beginning of the list. To do that, I need to use the insert function, which takes 2 arguments. The first argument will be the index, and then the next argument will be the element that we're trying to add. Let's say index 0, and I'm gonna add the element number 9. So we got 9 at the beginning of the list. Let's say I want to remove an element. To do that, I need to use the remove function, and it will take exactly 1 argument, which is the element we're trying to remove. So I'm gonna remove number 7, and I'm gonna run my program, and we'll get this list without the number 7. Let's say I want to delete number 1, 7, and 5. To do that, I can use the delete keyword, which is del, and then use bracket notation and mention from index 0 all the way to index number 3, which will delete for me 1, 7, and 5, and we will be left with 3 and 2. Let me show it to you, and yup, we got it. So what this expression did is, it deleted the elements starting from index 0 all the way to index number 2, which is 1, 7, and 5. We could also use the clear function to clear or erase all the list. So let me write lst.clear, and what we'll get is an empty list. There's a function called pop, and this function pops out the last element. Let me say pop, and what will I get is the list without the last element. Of course, I could mention the index of the element that I want to pop. Let's say index 2, and I'll get 1732 without the number 5. That's because number 5 is at index number 2. Let's say I had number 5 written 2 times in my list. I could use the count function to count the number of occurrence of an element. Let's say, let me delete first all of this, and I'm gonna write print lst.count, and I'm gonna insert 5. We should get 2, and yup, we got 2. Let's say I want to sort this list from the smallest number to the biggest. To do that, I'm gonna use the sort function, and let me write lst.sort, print lst, and we should get a sorted list. Now that I have sorted this list, let me use the reverse function to reverse this list. So lst.reverse, and I will get a reverse list. And there we go. The next function that I'm going to show you is the index function. And what this function does is, it will return the index of an element. Let me print lst.index, and I'm going to mention the element number 7. And what should I get is 1, because 7 is at index number 1, so I got number 1. Another useful function is, let's say I want to copy this list. What I can do is I could declare a variable and use the copy function, lst.copy, and when I print lst2, I should get a copy of lst number 1. And yup, we got another copy. Alright, that brings us to the end of today's video. We spoke about lists in general, then about 2D lists, and at the end, we spoke about list functions. Okay, thank you so much for watching. This is TechSent, and see you in the next one.